still hard to say if they existed. They are not mentioned in surviving Babylonian text, which is very strange because if you lived there you would think that they have seen the gardens. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I know it has been a few weeks, but I was very busy, so I didn't really have the time to do research and also to make a video. I noticed that I gained a few more subscribers. Welcome to the club. If you have a special request, you can leave it underneath the video. I would love to make stuff that you guys would like to see. For this video I'm going back to the ancient mysteries, because that has been a while ago. And the last video I made about ancient mysteries was about the Colossus of Rhodes. And the Colossus of Rhodes is a member of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So I thought it was nice to dedicate a whole series about the ancient wonders of the world. And it would actually be my first series. I already did the Colossus of Rhodes and that's already online, so you could check that out if you want to. So after this video there will be 5 others. And this one will be about another ancient mystery. And it's about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Unfortunately, like most of the ancient world wonders, it doesn't exist anymore. It's also the question if it actually did exist, because there's not a lot of evidence that could suggest that it has existed once. There are only some documents of ancient writers, but they didn't find any ruins, so that really doesn't make the case very strong. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, also known as the Hanging Gardens of Semiramis, were said to be built around 600 BCE by Nebuchadnezzar II in the ancient city Babylon. Babylon was one of the most important cities and maybe even the largest city. Many people came there to trade their goods, and it was also a very religious city. Babylon means Gate of God, so you can see why it is very important. It is best known for the Tower of Babel, the walls around the city, and of course the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Tower of Babel is described in the Hebrew Bible and in the Old Testament. The story of the Tower of Babel explains why we all speak a different language. The Tower of Babel and also the city of Babylon were built to reach the heaven. Of course, God didn't want them to reach heaven, so he was very angry and displeased. He spread everybody across the world and he made them all speak different languages so that they couldn't communicate with each other. Of course, this is not a problem anymore because I'm speaking English, and as most of you know, I'm Dutch, so this is not my native language. The Tower of Babel hasn't been found either, so it's still a part of mythology. And many people also consider the Hanging Gardens of Babylon as mythology because there hasn't been any proof. There are different stories about where it's made, when it's made and who made it. And I'm gonna tell you some of the stories and the most important stories that I could find on the internet. I already mentioned the story in the beginning. Nebuchadnezzar II, a Neo-Babylonian king who ruled between 605 and 562 BC, was married to Amethys. She came from another country called Media, which is now located in the northwest of modern Iran. In Media there were a lot of hills and it was very green and they had a lot of flowers. And she really missed her area because Babylon wasn't really that green. It was in the desert, so you could imagine there's not a lot of things to see there. The king was very in love with his queen and he was very sad to see that she wasn't happy. So he decided to build a garden for her. He made the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and also a grand palace, which was to be known as the marvel of mankind. So it must have been very impressive. He especially planted trees and flowers from the homeland of his queen. The garden was amazing. It had streams, waterfalls, pillars, buildings, of course hanging trees and hanging plants. Beautiful flora and fauna, and you could smell all the plants. It was very nice. And of course the garden was very peaceful. The gardens were built high above the ground on multi-level stone terraces. The plants weren't rooted into the ground like normal plants. It looked like they were hanging, so that's the reason why it's called the Hanging Gardens. Specifications of the size of the garden differ among sources, but they all agree that it was very high, around 75 feet, and also very big. But the biggest question until this day remains, and the question is, how did they manage to water all the plants? It would have taken 8,200 gallons of water to keep the plants watered. There wasn't a lot of rain in the region, so it was very hard to get water. but there was a river nearby called the Euphrates, so they could have used that water to water all the plants and to keep the streams and the waterfalls going. But there must have been a special system, because otherwise they couldn't get the water out of the Euphrates. Some kind of pump that could pump the water up 80 feet in the air. Ancient writers claim that they used hidden machines for irrigation, like water wheels and bucket on ropes.
The kind of screw used for drawing water uphill. Silent and able to keep a constant amount of water flowing against gravity, it would have been an engineering breakthrough. Sennacherib was using the shape of a date palm to describe an Archimedes screw. The Archimedes screw is named after the Greek who is believed to have invented it, but it seems Sennacherib was using it 400 years before Archimedes was even born.
However, there's no proof that this is true, and there's a big chance that they used human labor. It was very common, and well, of course the machines weren't as good as they are now, so it's very logical that they used a lot of human hands to get everything going. And the garden was also very big, so I can't imagine that they could do it with a system back in that time. But it has been a lot of years ago, so maybe just like the pyramids, we don't know what kind of system they used. Maybe it's lost knowledge that we are using right now again, but we have no idea that it already existed. If it truly existed, it must have been the most beautiful garden ever. And I wish that it still existed, and maybe they can rebuild it one day. I would definitely go there to see it. And they should add it to the new list of world wonders. It's still hard to say if they existed. They are not mentioned in surviving Babylonian text, which is very strange, because if you lived there you would think that they have seen the gardens. Herodotus, a Greek historian from that era, also didn't mention the Hanging Gardens, while he made a whole report about Babylon. He was known for writing down things in great detail, so it's weird that he didn't really write about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and he wrote about everything else. And since the gardens were so spectacular, it's very strange that he decided not to mention it. However, he didn't mention the Great Sphinx of Giza when he made a description about the Giza Plateau. And we all know that the Great Sphinx of Giza is still there, and it's not small, and it's very important until this day. So it's also weird that he didn't say anything about the Sphinx. I guess we will never know. But there are other ancient writers who describe the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in their work. One of them was Colossus of Rhodes. He was actually not from Kos, but he moved there, and if I'm right, he was a priest and he was from the area of Babylon. His work is lost to us, but he has been quoted by other ancient writers, and many of his descriptions of Babylon turned out to be true, so maybe he was also right about the Hanging Gardens. He was the one who wrote down why they were made, how they looked, and when they were made. Other writers who claim to have seen the gardens were Strabo, a Greek geographer, and Diodorus Siculus, who was a Greek historian. Alexander the Great's army also reported to have seen the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but they were known to exaggerate, so we can't really trust them. It could have been destroyed in the 1st century after their construction, because there was a big war between the Persians and the Macedonians, and due to that Babylon became severely damaged. So maybe because of that the Hanging Gardens were destroyed. The archaeological evidence is also inconclusive, because nothing has been found in Babylon. Another reason why it's hard to believe that the Hanging Gardens existed is because they didn't have building stone in Babylon. They had to dig mud from the riverbanks to create bricks. They had to stamp it and add water to it and let it dry in the sun afterwards. They weren't as strong as building stones, except when they made a very big wall. Then it would be strong enough. The location of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon hasn't been determined. Of course, everybody thinks that it is in Babylon, so it's presumed to be located on or near the east bank of the river Euphrates in eastern Turkey, about 31 miles south of Baghdad in Iraq. Some people think that the Hanging Gardens were actually in Syria, to be exact in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, back in the day of course, which is now modern Mosul in Iraq. And if that's correct, it's logical that we haven't found evidence that the Hanging Gardens were real, because we were looking in the wrong area. Maybe they even connected the wrong king. There was a king named Sennacherib, I hope I say it right because it's a very difficult name, and he claimed that his city was the New Babylon. And that city was Nineveh, and he did a lot of things that they reported in the classical reports. They also found a huge bronze screw near Mosul. It could have functioned to move the water from the Euphrates into the gardens. The area was also more likely to receive water from the aqueducts instead of Babylon, because Babylon was a lot of flat land, as I mentioned before, because they had no mountains. Maybe the hanging gardens weren't at all in Babylon, but near Mosul. And if they try to search there, maybe they can find the ruins that we are looking for all this time. So the conclusion is that it's still a mystery. We have no idea where it is. We have no idea if it existed. I wish it existed because it sounds amazing. I wish that I could walk there. But to be fair, if we look at all the evidence, there isn't a lot of evidence. And it's very hard to believe that they could water the gardens in that time period because it was a lot. And of course it's not impossible, because if we look at the pyramids, we still don't know how they built it. So there are a lot of other mysteries that we still need to solve. But I think it's weird that they didn't find ruins, because the pyramids are still there so we can see them. And if it was really as remarkable as they say, you must find something. And I think if it existed, that they are looking on the wrong place, because they have looked around Babylon for so long and it's not there. So I think it's just really not there. And maybe around Mosul, it sounds logical that they might have confused it with another king, because, well, it still happens this day that people confuse things and make other stories. People like to make everything prettier than it is. Maybe the king didn't even love his wife as much as they say in the story. Maybe it's just more romantic in that way. Anyway, for me, let's keep it that way, because I love romantic stories, and I hope that they rebuild the gardens and that I can go there. But I don't think they will. For now, it still remains a mystery, and I don't think that they are gonna give us the answers, but who knows. So this was my second video about the ancient wonders of the world, and my next one will be about... No, I'm not gonna tell you, it's still a surprise. Let me know what you would like to see. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, that would help me a lot. And of course, if you subscribe to my channel, it would mean even more. And I see you next time. Bye!